All right, folks, welcome to Byod Apps with LaFlan and Santawasso. I'm going to go through a lot of apps. Hopefully, I'll be able to get them done pretty quickly. My goal today is to get it so that you guys can work together either in groups or by yourself on a particular app or two that you find interesting, that you would like to see how it could possibly be implemented into your classroom. So, this is the link to the presentation, and it just is a good place for you to get all the links for all of the different sites that I'm going to mention today. We're familiar with a lot of these apps that are listed here, but I want to take you you on a journey to other apps that might be out there that you never even heard of, and don't really know necessarily how they might apply. We can help you with that. Okay, so by the end of today, I want you to start to think of one or two tools that you would like to use before you leave, and then we're going to give you some time at the end to actually implement them and take a look at them. So we've got 18 apps spanning 4 different major categories: formative assessments, blogging, student creation, and then we'll have a whole thing on augmented and virtual reality. So starting off with formative assessments. Edpuzzle is a really great website that actually allows for teachers to take in videos from across the internet among multiple platforms, but more importantly, among YouTube. And you can actually create questions that are embedded into the video. What happens is the video literally stops at the point of a question that a teacher has put in, and then the student has to respond. It can have to be multiple choice, short answer, and it integrates very well with Google Classroom, and that means a lot of things depending on the app, but in this particular app, it's a lot of integration. In particular, it allows for your rosters to sync. So whatever you've got in Google Classroom also syncs with Edpuzzle. I've listed a couple of places that you can take a look at there. That's a video that you can watch later. Another one is called Quizlet. This is not a video-based one, but it's similar to what Kahoot does. In fact, it's actually owned by Kahoot. What this one does differently than Kahoot is it allows for you to do like a homework version of it, so you can assign it to students. It also integrates with Google Classroom like Edpuzzle does, in that it actually gives you your rosters and syncs them. And you can also copy other teachers' quizzes and have students play along that way. The video to explain that. ZipGrade is not necessarily an app that students would use, but perhaps it's one that you might consider using if you would like to get more detailed feedback on student responses when it comes to tests. So I still have not found a tool that I like that allows for students to take tests online that locks the browser, but if you feel comfortable with doing that, then there are a lot of other ways to do this, but this is one method that is kind of more like old school. And what it does is it prints out a Scantron like you see in the image there. And what it does is you just take a picture of the students' responses and you can grade it, and the feedback is instantaneous. And I actually have some things, it does cost money. I don't like to show apps that cost money, but this one does cost a little bit. I've got some links there to getting a cheaper version of it. That's another video. Quizlet, which many of you have probably heard of, it's not controlled by Kahoot or anything like that. Students can create Quizlets and create flashcards, just another way to gather that kind of formative assessment, and there's a video on that. Bingo Baker is a really cool website that allows for you to create printed versions of bingo cards, and what it will do is it will take the terms that you put on the sheet, and then every time that you give them a link, or you can create 8 different bingo cards. It will create 8 different bingo cards, either online or an actual piece of paper. And it will also create a call list. And so students can even play without the app, and it's very simple as an app. It's very easy to do. Poll Everywhere is an app that I find very useful, although I have not totally integrated into my classroom. I like it because it goes right into Google Slides. So if you have a question on a slide and then you want to see what their answers are, you don't have to go to another website. It embeds right within the slide. And actually, Poll Everywhere is much more detailed than Google Forms, which might make it more useful to you, or it might actually just have too many features. But Poll Everywhere is a really good app. One of the cool things in there that I have not used but I'm interested in doing is something that creates like a Wordle. Now I have another app that does that, but I think that Poll Everywhere's Wordle might be even better than this because of the fact that it will integrate right into slides. But I also like the other app, which is called Answer Gardens. Socrative, which annoys me because I feel like it should be so creative, but it's called Socrative, is not an app that I have as of yet used, but it does similar things. I tried to put a lot of apps that do similar things because one teacher might like something different than another. One thing that's cool about this one is that they're featuring this new part of Socrative, so creative, that actually has students race for the correct answer. That's kind of cool, and you see the way it looks there. Google Forms is a great tool to use. I know that you know a lot about Google Forms, but the thing that's new now is that it actually is a tool that will not just do surveys, but actually will correct responses and even give you feedback as to what the right answer should be. Some stuff for blogging. Seesaw is an app that was mostly used for students to share their portfolios, but they have also added in a blogging component, and I like it because of the fact that you can really moderate what goes on the blog. Since a lot of blogs are public, you want to be able to moderate that process. And students can also comment to one another on this. It's another tool to use for blogging. And then backchanneling. So backchanneling is maybe a term you've never heard of, but a backchannel basically means that while a class is going on, there are some students that have a question but they don't want to raise their hand. This gives them an opportunity to participate in other ways without verbally talking. So one app that does that I've used is basically just a chat room, but it sort of ends up like Twitter because you are limited to 140 characters. And you could use this as, for example, in an outer circle of a Socratic seminar. So students can't all participate at the same time, but the outer circle can do it. I've used it during a movie discussion. We've used it as a fake Twitter, and you can even have hashtags in there as well if you like, or put in websites. So it's another tool for students to kind of participate without talking. And then the Answer Garden is an example of a website that creates live Wordles. And what's cool about this one is that it makes it so that you can collaborate on a Wordle. And if there's a term that a student agrees with as well, like wants to write, you can actually just mouse over that particular term and then it will count it again. So it makes it bigger. That's why some words are bigger and smaller. I like that app. I've used that in class. Student creation, so memes are a lot of things that students are really interested in, so there is actually a website that helps students create memes. And it might be a good way to have students summarize what they learned for the day. Google Keep is another website that was great because students already have Google accounts, so they don't need to sign in again since they're in the computer. If they're using their Chromebooks, they will already be there. So Google Keep is basically a note tracker, but you can kind of think of it as like Post-its. And it could be to-do lists. Maybe it's a way for students to get organized for the work that they're doing on a particular project, or maybe it's just a way to organize their thoughts about what they're doing in class that day. Probably a lot of applications. I have not explicitly used it, but it's a pretty good website to get students organized. And then Recap is a really interesting app that I have not used, but I have, like in the classroom, I've used it, but I have not used it in the classroom just yet because I just found out about it this year, but I'm really excited about this one. Basically what it does is it allows students to create a collaborative video. So what you do, the classic example for Recap is you say at the end of a lesson, what did you learn today? And you send a video out, and then students can respond with a video. So they film themselves and respond. And then at the end, when all the different students' clips are handed in, you can actually create a whole class-created recap. So it gives you a sense of what students learned that way. And at the end of this, what I'd like for you to do is to go to this website and put that class pin in and actually create a recap about what you learned today. Voicethread is another app that I think is extremely useful for students because it allows them to pull in lots of images from websites and other places to actually synthesize what they've learned. And what they can do is they have an image and they can talk over that image. Some applications there. Augmented reality and virtual reality. So augmented reality basically is this idea that it doesn't replace what you actually see, but it just adds on to. So one of these is a QR code. So sometimes it's hard to get students to get all in the same place, and you can actually just create a QR code. If they take a picture of that with their phone using a QR reader, they can instantaneously go to that particular website. And there's all kinds of teachers doing actual scavenger hunts using the QR codes and placing them all around schools for the purpose of getting students to be engaged and looking around. Erasmus is another app that I have not actually done a lot of work with. In fact, I'm so far today finding it a little bit frustrating, but I think ultimately it could be a very interesting tool. What it does is it actually creates a video on top of real world images. So one of the applications was a sheet of paper on an interactive bulletin board like you're seeing in the video, and you can watch that later where a teacher has a math problem that is unfinished. Students work on it themselves and then put their phone up to the board where the math problem is, and then it finishes the problem and shows how you're supposed to complete the assignment. And there's a lot of other applications that you can use. And then Google Cardboard is really inexpensive. I do have a fair number of them. I'm also writing a grant for it, so hopefully I would get that and I would have a set of 30. But right now I have about 20 or so of varying quality. That allows this. What this does is it's virtual reality, so it replaces what you see. And students can go on whole class field trips to places that we never could have done before. And there are so many different applications for almost every single every single kind of course that it doesn't make sense for me to list here, but I could walk you through that as well today. So I highly suggest that you follow the Twitter accounts of the apps that you might find interesting, because it will give you ways by which you can implement it in your classroom, and maybe you've never even thought of them. And I really suggest you join Twitter for that purpose. I've used it for my personal learning network. And my favorite person on Twitter right now, and has been for a number of years, is Richard Byrd, or Byron. I don't really know how to say his last name. He's in Maine, and he was a social studies teacher, so of course I like him because of that, but he also has a lot of other applications. Basically, his website, Free Tech for Teachers, is where I found most of these apps, and where I find most of my information about new apps that are coming out. So he's a good person to follow. I have a poll that I included in here that I want you to fill out, and we'll talk about that later. You can just go to that website. And Richard Byrd, again, I have just a couple of links that I thought would be useful for you on comparison charts of a lot of the tools that we talked about today, and there's a link to that. And I do also have some prizes that I'd like to give out. So if you have any questions, please contact us. You can either contact Christina Santawasso or myself. I'm here in the DLC on B days. Thank you.